CNN political analyst Maggie Haberman joins us now. Maggie, what are the expectations? Trump, the president-elect, just had a January 6th that he denied Joe Biden. He's having the transition. He'll now have the inauguration that he denied Joe Biden. Where is the former president's head at as he prepares for taking office?
Well, look, he continues to try to say that he has a historic mandate. He doesn't have a historic mandate, Anderson, but he certainly does have a form of a mandate. He, won the popular vote, the first Republican to do it in 20 years. I think that he is going to focus on a series of day one actions, and I think you are going to see them, seeking to essentially swamp the system, for lack of a better way of putting it, and just, overwhelm the system. I think you will see a lot on immigration. I think you will see a lot on a number of other campaign promises. The one that is unclear, Anderson, is what does Trump do about these pardons that he has said he is going to do or suggested he is likely to do for some of the people arrested in connection with the January 6th attack by a pro-Trump mob during the certification of his successor's election. Now, it is one thing that people didn't vote with January 6th and Trump's lies about the election as their guidepost, but it's entirely different to try to test the system and see what people will tolerate with these pardons. There's not a huge appetite for them nationally, so we'll see what that looks like.
Yeah, I mean, he's called them hostages repeatedly on the campaign trail, played records of them singing the national anthem. How broad do you think those pardons might be?
I think there is a debate within Trump's world about exactly what to do and who to pardon. I think that the point that the officers was making is that Trump ran as a pro-law enforcement candidate, but these were officers in a number of cases who were injured, and these were officers who were guarding against Trump's supporters, guarding this building. This is a complicated bit of messaging for Trump. So, it is going to be interesting to see who he decides, if he ultimately does go ahead with what he said he wants to do, who he decides is worthy of a clemency grant here.
Maggie Haberman, thanks so much. I appreciate it. Back with the team here in New York. Congressman Kinzinger, should President Biden issue pardons for the January 6th committee members, including yourself?
No, I don't want it. Look, here's the thing.
You don't want it?
No, because the second a pardon is issued, and look, I understand the theory behind it, because Donald Trump has clearly said he's going to go after everybody. And it's not going to be for the January 6th investigation. What they'll do is they'll weaponize other investigations. They'll look into everything and start an investigation that'll end up coming to naught, force people to pay money. This happened to Brad Raffensperger in Georgia as he was forced to defend himself. But the second you take a pardon, it looks like you're guilty of something. I'm guilty of nothing besides bringing the truth to the American people and in the process embarrassing Donald Trump, because for 187 minutes he sat there and did absolutely nothing and showed how weak and scared he truly was. So no, I don't want it. And, the bottom line is, if he wants to bring up January 6th again, we've had all this talk about how we're moving on from January 6th, and trust me, Anderson, I would love to. Like, my life has been defined by this for 4 years. But if he wants to bring it back, I will be happily talk about everything the committee did and learned and re-embarrassed.
What some people may not realize is you're saying you don't want a pardon. Fighting whatever might come your way can cost you and your family, hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, you think about it, and this happened with Brad Raffensperger. People would just sue him. And so he'd have to defend himself. And he had to defend himself out of personal money. I have insurance from my time in office, but still, you have to defend yourself, spend money. And then ultimately, DOJ or whatever says, yeah, we didn't find anything, but 3 years later, after you spend this, that's how they weaponize this. It's not going to be that they're going to come after you for actual January 6th investigation. They'll make it hard. But you know what? The thing I take into account is I will use that as an opportunity to show the American people what the country should not be and ever be again. And if that's a process to save, democracy, then I'm happy to fight that fight.
There's also kind of an effort in this. Yes, it's about intimidation, harassment. It's also to smear people. And in a hyper-polarized environment, that can become dangerous. That's just a fact. When people's actions are misrepresented, when things are called treasonous that are very much in line with the law and congressional procedure. But to Adam's point, I have not heard anyone who outright say that they would like a pardon, because I don't think anyone believes they did anything wrong on the committee. But what stuns me is Donald Trump won. Yet you have Mike Johnson say they're going to investigate the committee. Donald Trump's still talking about January 6th. The unwillingness to move on and take a beat from what was one of the darkest days in his first term and just be forward-looking. There is so much this Congress could do that could be really good for the American people. It is not investigating Liz Cheney. That is a waste of time, taxpayer dollars, and it is not what people elected him to do.
It's also an attempt to change the subject, because part of the process of whitewashing January 6th and the events of that day, is trying to make this not about that, but about the people who were looking into it, and turning pretty routine conduct of Congress people, yourself included, Adam, into something criminal is part of the plan that is designed to distract. And I do think that it is probably going to be enabled by pretty senior people in the Congress, and that we should probably just get used to it. This is the reality. Trump, in a way, not only does he want to do it, but I think his base is giving him no choice. He ran on doing this. So I think that's one of the reasons that we can expect it.
Go ahead.
I actually think that's why the last time we were talking about the nominees of Akash Patel has been very clear that he wants to lead the charge with the FBI in doing some of these investigations. So that actually could be one signal for the Senate to say, we don't want to go down that path. We want to and push back on his nomination. Look, I'll sound like a broken record. There is an opportunity here for Donald Trump. I'm not going to agree with his policies, probably what he puts forth in the tax bill or on immigration, but he could be a leader and earn some of my respect by acknowledging the mistakes of the past and saying we are moving forward. I am highly doubtful he will do that, but there is an opportunity because we are an extremely divided country, and there are many Americans that did not want him to be reelected because of January 6th. And there is a chance and an opportunity for him to govern, but I think he will be distracted by retribution.
Well, first of all, I think when he has said in the past, our retribution will be our success, I think that's the correct way to look at it. You know, this has been a strange period because the events of January 6th, the following investigations, the legal actions after that, and then all the other investigations to him, the lawfare against him. Ultimately, the American people got to look at all of this on Election Day and make a decision. And they did. And so if I were in his shoes, I would not feel happy about everything that I had to live through, everything that happened to me on all of those fronts, but I would feel extremely vindicated about what happened to me politically. And moving forward, the best possible vindication here for him as a president would be to pass the laws that you said you were going to pass, fix the immigration system you were going to fix, get the economy under control for everyday people, unleash American energy. You know, all these things you ran on, if you were able to do that, you'll be remembered not just as the greatest comeback story politically of all time, but as a really good president. And so I think there's a way to do all that while leaving the past in the past and accepting the vindication of the politics of Election Day.
Let's start with Jeff Zeleny, who's in West Palm Beach, Florida, tracking former President Trump's response to this, now President-elect Trump, I should say. Jeff, how is he processing today's events?
Well, Boris, there is no question this is one more step in just the remarkable comeback over 4 years that Donald Trump has been at the center of course, leaving Washington 4 years ago in political defeat and now rising again, oddly turning January 6th and the aftermath of that day into a political strength. I'm told he was watching the proceedings today. One advisor described it to me as pure vindication, but it is clear now this is soon to be Donald Trump's government. The confirmation hearings will be coming in the Senate. Certainly the order of the day will be the burden is now on the Republicans in control of Congress and indeed the White House to carry on and try and carry out what they promised to the American people. But for today, at least, certainly watching this with a very normal proceeding on Capitol Hill. That's how this has normally been. Even former Vice President Mike Pence putting out a statement. He's saying, I welcome the return to order and civility. And he gave a particular nod to Vice President Harris for doing her duty and presiding over, of course, her own defeat.
And Jeff, I also wanted to ask you about one of the latest public statements from the president-elect. He privately had been suggesting for weeks, we understand, that Canada should become a U.S. state. But today, with the announcement that Justin Trudeau is resigning, he's now speaking more openly about this idea.
Right, Boris, taking that one step further, just a short time after Justin Trudeau, the Canadian Prime Minister, said he would step down as the leader of his party, the president-elect continuing to sort of poke our neighbors to the north here by saying this in Truth Social. Let's read it together. He said, many people in Canada love being the 51st state. If Canada merged with the U.S., there would be no tariffs. Taxes would go way down. and they would be totally secure from the threat of Russian and Chinese ships that are constantly surrounding them. Together, what a great nation it would be. Of course, Canada is its own nation. This is North America, but not a country. It's a continent. So there is no chance, of course, that Canada is going to join the United States. But the president-elect continuing to take a stab at this. The question is, with the new leadership and a leadership vacuum in Canada, how that will impact the politics there, as well as the plan for tariffs here. We should see all of that play out here. So many more questions about that, but certainly the president-elect taking a moment to once again renew his call to claim Canada again. Not possible, Boris.
Quite a sales pitch. Jeff Zeleny live for us, not far from Mar-a-Lago. Thank you so much, Jeff.
It's official. Congress has now certified Donald Trump's 2024 presidential election victory. The democratic process, small d democratic process, today playing out as the founding fathers intended, rather uneventfully. Vice President Kamala Harris fulfilling her constitutional duty, presiding over the counting of the Electoral College votes that certified her own election loss to Trump. Just a short time ago, after the ceremony, she spoke about that moment.
Today, I did what I have done my entire career, which is take seriously the oath that I have taken many times to support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
Even the winter storm pulverizing our nation's capital did not stop the certification. The Capitol grounds are covered in snow. The last time America certified a presidential election, the Capitol grounds were covered with an angry mob, one that soon turned violent. On this day 4 years ago, election lies by Mr. Trump fueled many of his supporters to storm the Capitol, viciously assaulting police officers while trying to stop the election certification and overturn Trump's legitimate loss. Now, I don't have to tell you every detail of what happened. You probably watched some of this live as it unfolded. Maybe you even remember this moment. I want people out there to remember how they feel right now as they watch these images live, because there is going to be an attempt by the people who were part of this effort. President Trump, House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, Senator Ted Cruz, Senator Hawley, etc. There is going to be an attempt to whitewash what's going on right now. Now, you might recall in the immediate aftermath of the attack, Republican leaders, including Kevin McCarthy, condemned it. McCarthy took to the floor of the House to say that Trump bears responsibility. But now, of course, Mr. Trump, the president-elect, calls January 6th a day of love. And even today, brand new alternate histories, alternate realities are emerging about what happened that day. Today, Republican Congressman Mike Collins of Georgia posted on social media, quote, "On this day in history, in 2021, thousands of peaceful grandmothers gathered in Washington, D.C. to take a self-guided, albeit unauthorized tour of the U.S. Capitol building. Earlier that day, President Trump held a rally where supporters walked to the Capitol to peacefully protest the certification of the 2020 election. During this time, some individuals entered the Capitol, took photos, and explored the building before leaving," unquote. That is not an accurate description of what happened here, at least here on planet Earth on that day. Of course, there were some Trump supporters peacefully protesting, and many did not enter the Capitol, but no one's taking issue with them. The issue with the people doing this to this policeman. That cry of pain by that law enforcement officer, that not backing of the blue, that is the reality of January 6, 2021. More than 600 people have been charged with assaulting or obstructing police in that effort to undermine the free and fair election of 2020. Now, in 2 weeks, Donald Trump, the president-elect, will return to the White House, and he has promised to grant presidential pardons to Capitol rioters. We do not know yet which ones he is talking about. CNN's Paula Reed, when we talk about the January 6 prosecutions, let's put this on the screen now if we can. 1,580 more of them rioters have been charged. 1,270 rioters have been convicted. About 310 cases remain pending. We should note on the convictions, a vast majority of these individuals pleaded guilty. What can you tell us about potential pardons that Mr. Trump keeps talking about?
Well, earlier today, Enrique Tarrio, he is a leader of one of the far-right groups. He actually asked Trump for a pardon. Now, he was sentenced to 22 years in prison after being convicted of seditious conspiracy for his role in January 6th. Now, the judge who sentenced him called Tarrio the ultimate leader, the ultimate person who organized the right-wing group on that day. And today, the 4th anniversary of the attack, Tarrio's lawyer is asking President-elect Trump for a pardon. Now, as you just put up on the screen, January 6th prompted the biggest prosecution the DOJ has ever done. But Trump's return to power has really thrown into question the future of all of these cases because he has promised pardons in the first day of his presidency. But he's sort of given these conflicting statements about who will get a pardon and whether there should be any exceptions for people who were especially violent. Now, I've spoken with Trump advisors who are working on this, and they tell me they definitely want to move quickly. So there's not going to be like an individual application process that you usually see with clemency. They don't want this to take too long. One thing that they are weighing is possibly pardoning certain offenses, but it's complicated because even if someone's charged with assault, there's a huge range of conduct that can be charged as assault, and Tarrio is really the perfect example of the challenge here because he was directing the violence, he was not participating in it. So I'm told clemency is definitely coming for many of the people who participated in January 6th, but it's unclear if everyone is either going to get a pardon or a commutation.
Interesting. Donnie O'Sullivan, you're live on Capitol Hill for us, too. You were at an event earlier today where people were campaigning for the release of the J6 convicts, the January 6 convicts. Tell us about the event.
That's right, Jake, and a much quieter scene here tonight than there was this time 4 years ago when the city was about to go into a total lockdown under a curfew, as I'm sure you remember. The event today, a small amount of people, about a couple of dozen people who are family members, who have family members serving time for their actions on January 6, who are campaigning for those pardons that Paula mentioned. These are some of the reddest of the MAGA base, and they want Trump, one, to pardon their loved ones and let them out of prison and jail, and also to pardon everybody. They want absolute blanket pardon from the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers on down with no exceptions. And I think what we're going to see in the first few weeks of this Trump presidency is these J6 families, as they're known within the MAGA universe, they won't stay quiet if Trump does not act quickly and does not act very decisively on pardoning all these folks. So these are some of his most diehard supporters, and they're hopeful, but they are nervous that he may not pardon everybody.
Meanwhile, President-elect Trump is claiming that President Biden is making the White House transition difficult. I want you to listen to this. This is Trump. Listen to this.
They'll do everything they can to make it as difficult as possible. You know, they talk about a transition. They're always saying, oh, no, we want to have a smooth transition from party to party, of government. Well, they're making it really difficult. They're throwing everything they can in the way.
I want to bring in CNN's Caitlin Collins. She's covering all of this for us. Caitlin, how is the president-elect reacting to this specific day, and why is he saying what he just said?
Well, Wolf, I'll note that comment there from Trump stands in pretty stark contrast to obviously his own actions 4 years ago that are the reason today got so much coverage. Typically, it was a day in elections past that didn't warrant a lot of attention, but because of what happened 4 years ago and Trump's effort to make the transition process quite difficult, to say the least, are the reason that there was such a reflection on what happened then and how today went. I mean, today's process lasted about 30 minutes. Last year, it took about 14 hours because, of course, they had to pause as rioters were storming the Capitol, and that came after weeks of Trump trying to sow doubt about the election and trying to overturn the results, which ultimately was unsuccessful. But on the effort about Biden trying to block his transition, as he alleged, they are trying to make it more difficult, as he said. That's not a comment that his incoming chief of staff, Susie Wiles, echoed when she was speaking with Mark Caputo in an interview for Axios. She said that actually working with the Biden team had gone quite smoothly. We've seen some of those briefings getting underway. But Wolf, this comes as Trump is looking at today and seeing this as just one step closer to regaining power on January 20th and making those plans for what that's going to look like, and also just how differently Washington is going to be shaped when he comes here. I mean, you heard from John Curtis there, the newest senator from Utah, speaking to Manu. That is one voice who will certainly be someone to watch over the next few years, but he sounds very different than a lot of his Republican colleagues in the Senate, many of whom who were critical of Trump on that day are certainly not so now, Wolf.
Caitlin, on another sensitive issue, we've learned that the former leader of the Proud Boys is now asking President-elect Trump for a pardon for his role in the Capitol riot. Tell us about that. What are you hearing?
Yeah, this might be one of the most notorious defendants and ultimately who was convicted because of his actions on that day, Enrique Tarrio. He was a leader of the Proud Boys for quite some time. Obviously, they showed up en masse that day, and many of them were subsequently arrested and tried and convicted for their actions on that day. He got one of the longest sentences, actually, Wolf, out of anyone on January 6th. He got 22 years that he was sentenced for on very serious charges of a seditious conspiracy that only he and a handful of others faced on that day, and now is seeking a pardon from the president-elect Donald Trump. A question still tonight is whether or not he is going to get one. Trump has promised to pardon several of the January 6 defendants. It's unclear how many he's looking at now. And this is a real divide, even in Trump's orbit, over what that should look like, because he said he's going to do it not only on day one, but within moments of taking office. You've heard from some Republicans saying that Trump should do this on a case-by-case basis, that he should evaluate this. But then you've heard others who argue that Trump should just pardon all of them, that the prosecutions were overly aggressive. That is going to be a big thing to watch on that day, because, of course, as you know, Wolf, over 140 police officers were assaulted on that day by the people who were convicted, a lot of them who also pleaded guilty.
And good evening, I'm Erin Burnett. And out front on this Monday, we have breaking news. The Proud Boy pardon. The leader of the Proud Boys, Enrique Tarrio, asking President-elect Donald Trump for a pardon today, 4 years to the day, after the violent insurrection on Capitol Hill that members of the Proud Boys and other Trump supporters stormed the United States Capitol in an attempt to overturn the 2020 election. Tarrio right now is serving a 22-year sentence for seditious conspiracy and leading a plot to prevent the transfer of power. His attorney is speaking to one person now and one person only to plea Trump, writing, Enrique Tarrio was portrayed throughout the government's case as a right-wing extremist that promoted a neo-fascist militant organization. Henry is nothing more than a proud American that believes in true conservative values. Just to be clear, this is what Tarrio said on tape just days before January 6th.
There's ways that you can enact change. You can get armed and go to the Capitol. As crazy as that sounds, like, yeah, I think that's the way that you make the biggest noise.
Getting armed, going to the Capitol, true conservative values. And Trump's push to pardon January 6 convicted rioters is now meeting resistance in his own party. Tonight, Trump's close ally, Senator Lindsey Graham, raising a red flag about a blanket pardon.
I'm going to leave that to them. It's his power to exercise. But people who beat up police officers, or put them in a different category than others.
Of course, Tarrio's men, you can see them on video on this day 4 years ago, marching toward the Capitol. One of them in this video using a police officer's shield to bust out a window in the Capitol, allowing rioters to flood in. And now, just today, 4 years after those moments, Trump today was certified as the president-elect of the USA.
Today was obviously a very important day, and it was about what should be the norm and what the American people should be able to take for granted, which is that one of the most important pillars of our democracy is that there will be a peaceful transfer of power.
And of course, the vice president is tasked, right, with certifying the election, and she did that. It was a calm, respectful procedure. A moment that might make us all forget that feeling 4 years ago that we had when we sat glued to whatever your screen of choice was. Maybe you were even moved to tears that day, watching a terrifying, horribly un-American moment. And just look at pictures from that day that you're looking at here compared to today. You had Trump supporters scaling the walls of the U.S. Capitol then. 4 years later, the Capitol quiet, just snow on the steps in the major snowstorm. Then you had officers clashing with insurrectionists, the Capitol hallways. Remember that moment when Mitt Romney suddenly turns and runs? Today, those hallways just filled with law enforcement officials. These jarring juxtapositions coming as tonight, the Washington Post is reporting that President Biden is saying in private that he made a mistake. Specifically, that he should have picked someone else, not Merrick Garland, to be the Attorney General. It's an incredible thing to say. And why? Why would Biden be saying this? Specifically because of how slow the Justice Department under Merrick Garland was in prosecuting Trump for January 6th. And our Evan Perez is reporting tonight exclusively that within the Justice Department, a source is telling him that the Justice Department, quote, wasted time. Other former justice officials telling Evan that the charges could have been brought a whole year earlier. Now that is a wow moment. That is something that could have changed where Trump is standing tonight, what happened today, and in fact, the entire arc of American history. Evan Perez is out front live in Washington. And Evan, I've got to talk about your breaking reporting here exclusively, but first, that breaking news on a possible pardon tonight. What more are you learning about this request by former Proud Boys leader Enrique Tarrio for a full pardon from Trump?
Well, Aaron, the incoming president is not really saying exactly how he's going to go forward with these pardons. But Enrique Tarrio is one of the ones that I think would get a lot of pushback from people like Lindsey Graham, people in the president's circle who support law enforcement. Remember, Enrique Tarrio had one of the longest sentences, 22 years for seditious conspiracy. He's one of over 1,500 people who've been charged with crimes related to January 6th. You'll know that over 600 of those were charged with assaulting police officers and other crimes related to the violence that day. And of course, as you know, the Proud Boys were at the center of a lot of the most extreme violence we saw that day. Just that evening, you had law enforcement trying to regain control of the Capitol so that you can certify the vote, and the Proud Boys were the ones that were leading that resistance. So certainly, if Donald Trump decides to give Enrique Tarrio a pardon, it would certainly send a strong message about what else he plans to do with the rest of these people charged that day.
Yeah, certainly would. And of course, the irony that Tarrio's attorney had earlier said that everything he did was on the direction of Trump, right? And it blamed Trump, and now is, of course, appealing to him with a very different message. So, you're here on January 6th. Evan, Trump's election win is certified by Vice President Kamala Harris. An incredible moment to just think about for a moment. And you have extensive new reporting tonight on whether we'd even be here in this context if Attorney General Merrick Garland had charged Trump earlier for his actions on January 6th. What are you hearing from your sources inside the DOJ?
Well, I think one of the things you're hearing right now is people are taking stock of what could have been, right? And one of the things that did happen in that first year of the investigation in 2021, Aaron, we had, information about a possible meeting between Donald Trump and members of the Proud Boys. That was one of the things that the Justice Department, with these prosecutors, really bore in on, tried to figure out whether that actually happened. They also spent time looking into that Willard room, that Willard Hotel room, as well as the financial ties with some of the rioters who did come to the Capitol. In the end, as you know, that 1 year ended up really finding no direct ties to Trump. And so one of the things you hear from people who were involved in the investigation, we talked to about a dozen people, one of the things that they said was, we could have probably brought this case a lot earlier. I'll read you just a part of one thing they said. One poor person we talked to, they wasted time, they were not strategic, and they said in the end, they ended up helping Trump with the primary and dividing the country. And I guess, certainly in the end of this, Aaron, there's a lot of regrets there at the Justice Department. They do believe, though, that they had to go down all of these investigative leads before bringing these charges.